Jim, it's been a long time, my friend. October 2nd to be exact.
It has been a while. It's good to be finally doing this again, though. It's taken us a little bit.
Just a wee bit of time between episode 6 and this being episode 7 of the Cantina from the Brick City Blockade Star Wars Podcast Network.
Well, in all fairness, it is less time than it took between episode 6 and episode 7 of Star Wars. So we're still on a good timetable.
There we go. So it's been a while, and if you're listening to the Brick City Blockade on your podcast catcher, iTunes, Google Play, wherever, and you're a new listener, you might not know who Jim and I are. And this show, The Cantina, is basically, Jim, this is just you and I talking Star Wars like you and I normally would. And we said, hey, we're both part of this network. Let's just record these conversations because they go all over the place.
They really do. It's kind of Star Wars stream of consciousness, excuse me, sometimes. So yeah, it does go all over the place, and hopefully we can stay on point on a few things to get a couple of things out there. But yeah, we'll kind of go all over the map as usual, I'm sure.
So the last time you and I, like I said, we recorded back in October. You are an accountant by trade, and you go into a little bit of hibernation between January and April. So we have a lot of catching up to do. So this is as good as time as any to kick back off the Cantina podcast here. I know we just ran into each other not that long ago over at Krypton Comics, the Convoy for the Cause. We got the live stream that we got there, but some of the things that you and I talked about there, I want to expound on a little bit more. Heck, you and I haven't really even talked that much about The Last Jedi. Certainly haven't talked at all. We briefly kind of know each other's thoughts about Solo. Rebels is come and gone. There's a heck of a lot more content out there. It's a crazy time to be a Star Wars fan, Jim.
How does that happen in just 6 months or so? That's amazing when you think about it. If you go back a few years, 6 months and being a Star Wars fan, there would be basically nothing new unless you were a very big expanded universe fan, right? If you read a lot of books or comic books, graphic novels. And now we have all these different forms of media that in just 6 months come and go, and we can fall so behind. Absolutely.
It can feel like I don't even know how you attempted to keep up with anything. I know you said you had fallen behind. I've fallen behind on some of the novels and stuff. I certainly am not current and was not current before I really started digging into them. There's quite a few of the early ones like A New Dawn and Tarkin and a couple of those other ones, but I haven't had a chance to do anything with the Solo, The Last Shot. I guess apparently there's another book out now, Jim.
Yeah.
It's very much so. And you and I have alluded to this in some of our very first episodes, that you kind of have to just be as much of a Star Wars fan as your time allows. And, you know, obviously we've talked before, the feature films are kind of like the top dog, so to speak. But then it's after that, it's just kind of engaging yourself as much as you can after that. And we've said it before too, just because you're not able to stay current with everything, or you choose not to, or there's so many things now. And one of the things I do want to talk about later is too, like the different things you can like. And we talked about this at Krypton with, there's going to be different things that are going to draw us in as fans, and we're going to like some things and dislike others, but it really doesn't make us any less or more of a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, exactly. And I was telling you before we started recording that I made the mistake of looking at my Facebook feed for the first time in 5 months or so. And what you were just talking about, there was somebody discussing The Last Jedi. And the comment was somewhere along the lines of diehard Star Wars fans know that it's garbage. And I'm just looking at that, knowing that we were going to come on and probably talk about something along these lines. And I just thought to myself, how fitting is that? How horrible is that, first of all, that this person feels the need to make a comment where they define what a diehard Star Wars fan is. If I'm enough of a Star Wars fan to sit here and do a podcast, I'd like to throw myself in that diehard category. And I love The Last Jedi. But who's to define these things? And I'll never understand how people can't see the difference between having criticism of a movie and just trashing a movie completely and crossing a line to some weird extent.
So, we've talked about it at Krypton. You can be a fan or a fanatic. We talk about all the time about our network where we're positivity and unity is community. I don't want that to get misconstrued that we are positive about everything, or we can't be critical, or you can't dissect things, and we don't just sit there and think everything is awesome, because it really isn't, and we all have different likes and dislikes. I think there's a very important thing going on in fandom right now, Jim, that just from my vantage point, it's the like and the dislike it's become personal. And I think it's becoming more than the films or disliking or putting people into categories. You can be critical about a movie and not necessarily, you can like other things. I think when you make it personal, and then Star Wars is so big now that you and I are not going to change the opinion hardly of anybody. People's minds are made up. And we're not out there, Star Wars isn't this little niche thing anymore that we're out there trying to get people to be. We want more fans of Star Wars. I mean, we want more listeners, and we want to grow the friendom that we've created. But it's not our job, Jim, to try to convince people that they need to like Star Wars or they need to like different parts of it. We can share what we like and go. I don't know, Jim. I'm kind of rambling here a little bit, but I think it's important to know. That's the point
of the show, Brian. Come on, ramble away.
I'm on this this tangent now, but it's not up to you and I or Robin or Chris or Scott or anybody to try to convince people to like these things. If you happen to go out and watch Solo and you like it, great. If you go out and it wasn't your favorite, great. You don't have to go convince other people that just because you liked it or disliked it, it's not your job to go change somebody else's opinion. There's this funny graphic going out, and I guess it's a little crude. I mean, we're a family show here. But Jim, I think I've shared it in one of in either a text or something to you too. And it's like this 3-pane cartoon, and it shows, a man at a urinal, and there's like 30 urinals to his right.
Yeah.
And you see this one guy walking down, and I won't get into like bathroom etiquette here, but usually you leave a urinal in between the other ones. So, you go either every other one, unless it's really busy, and then they all fill up. Little sidebar in that. But then the guy in the cartoon in the second pane comes right next to the other guy, and then he turns his head, and again breaking another etiquette rule in the restroom. You don't talk to each other in the restroom. And then of course it turns to him, and the guy turns to him and he goes, "I hate The Last Jedi, and you should too." And I mean, it's just perfect. Like, this guy didn't want to. I don't know. I just love that cartoon. Because it's a great illustration of those out in the fandom that are out there to bring other people down with them. Save me here, Jim.
Well, and so first off, I need to correct something. Depending on if it's a wide open wall of urinals, like you were discussing there from that cartoon, it's 2. If there's one guy and you can leave 2 in between you and the other guy, it's 2. The 1 is the bare minimum, just so you know, unless it's busy. I just wanted to clear that up and throw that out there. But yeah, I was saying this at Krypton a little bit, and my point was, we're not going to be able to get away from what some people think is their Star Wars and what somebody else thinks is their Star Wars. Unfortunately, there's always going to be this notion of, well, that's not my Star Wars, because we're hearing that a lot, right? With the newer movies, people are very against Disney taking over the franchise, which I think is kind of funny, because if you were going to take the 4 movies they've done, I have to say that the saga movies are similar, but Solo and Rogue One are 2 different films compared to the saga movies. So if you can't find one out of these 4 films that you consider your Star Wars, I think you might just need to hold on to whatever you like, whether it's the prequels or original trilogy, and call it a day, because you're probably never going to get another Star Wars movie by your criteria. So the point being, there's going to be a lot of different movies that fall into different categories that are going to appeal to some fans more than other fans. And if a movie comes out like Solo that isn't your favorite, it's okay. It doesn't have to be the best movie of all time. It doesn't have to be in your top 3 of Star Wars movies. You can actually enjoy a Star Wars movie and walk out of it and not want to go back and see it again in the theater. I know Last Jedi and Force Awakens, I went back many times. Solo, I'm not going to go back to see it. And it's not because I didn't like it. It's just, I enjoyed it, but it's not my favorite. It doesn't get me that excited. Didn't get me that excited going into it. Nothing wrong with the movie, really. But that's okay.
But I think the important thing there too, Jim, is I enjoyed it. I'm not sure where to rank it yet, because I've only seen it the one time. I will go back because I want to take my 6.5-year-old son to go see it and go with my wife. But the fact that you and I disagree on a film, we're still friends. Like, the perfect example of this is the prequels. I enjoy the prequels. You absolutely detest them. Again, I don't think any less of you as a person because we disagree on that. It's actually more of a respect thing, because we have valid, you might not think I have a valid point, but we have valid points both ways.
From a certain point of view. Yeah. From a certain you have valid points. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off there.
No, that's all. I was cutting you off. But no, I think with Solo, it's a perfect example, because I'm actually kind of bummed that it's not, I'm not going to say that it's not doing well, because it's still doing well, but it's not living up to box office expectations. I think even Ron Howard and other people involved in it have said something along those lines on Twitter. And that's okay. But the downside is, I feel like a lot of the fan base that's seen this movie really, really likes it. Like, I could just be looking at sources that just happen to be overwhelmingly positive, but I do a lot of Redditing. So Reddit is the site that I like to go to. I do some of the Star Wars subreddits over there. And after The Last Jedi, it was a war zone on the spoilers conversation for The Last Jedi. And most of it was kind of overwhelming, like, they're ruining Star Wars. This isn't my Star Wars, blah, 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 blah. And for Solo, I have to say, like, the comments that I've seen in the spoiler threads, which I've read, every day, just about looking at new comments, they're still 95% positive, which is great. But not a lot of people are seeing the movie outside of either big fans of Star Wars or the average everyday moviegoer who might just be looking for a popcorn flick. There's this segment of Star Wars fans that just boycotted it for whatever reason. And I think that's kind of unfortunate, because I'm seeing this overwhelming positive reaction in some places. And I kind of feel like this, and I have a theory as to why this film did that. And I'm happy to see it, because I like seeing that. I like seeing a lot of the fan base agree on something, especially after The Last Jedi, where it was divisive amongst the fan base. But overall, I kind of feel like this movie reached out to more of the hardcore Star Wars fans. And can we preface this? And we're going to talk about Solo. Can we throw the spoilers out there? Can we do that? We didn't talk about it.
If we can avoid spoilers, I think, because it's still relatively. I mean, I know we're not. We may still have some listeners that haven't seen it yet. If we could talk about it in context without a few of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say there's one major thing in the movie that's consistent with, if you are not somebody who consumes a lot of Star Wars, you may be very confused walking out of that movie. And I you know, it's hard to talk about it without giving it away.
Hmm.
But an interesting thing was there's a movie reviewer that I really like that's on a local radio station, and he's a big Star Wars fan. And he walked out of that movie enjoying it, and then it hit him that something didn't make sense time-wise. And he went on the radio show giving the review of the movie, and there were Star Wars fans that had to call in and say, no, 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 you
Hmm.
need to know about this and this, which isn't something movie related, in order to know why this works. And the guy was legitimately like pissed off. He goes, no, I want to be able to go to a movie and know what's going on and not have to go to these other sources to consume it. And it was interesting to see that because he's a pretty big Star Wars fan and he doesn't want to consume any other media, and he felt out of place. So that's why I felt like this movie, it really kind of resonates, I think, with people who are deeper Star Wars fans in the sense of the amount of different source material they go to and the different media that they go through, because there were a lot of references, there were a lot of things that you might not know unless you were into some of these other non-movie Star Wars sources, which I think is really cool because to me, it was almost the Disney saying, it's time to give something to the more hardcore fans of this franchise. So we're going to take a risk where the average person in this movie that knows some about Star Wars might be confused about some of this at the end of the day, but we're okay with taking that risk because we know the big fans are going to understand this and everybody else will catch up afterwards. That, I think, is a monumental thing that Disney did in that movie, in my mind, because we've always talked about you don't have to go to and consume these other things, because really, how much of that are they actually going to do in a major movie? They've crossed that line. They've said we are going to take. It's not The Last Jedi with having the compass from Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront 2 that you get in the Luke Skywalker movie in the corner of Luke's hut. It was a major thing that we think is going to affect plots of future movies.
Yeah. So definitely, and it is difficult to talk about it. I will say, because I was very wrong in my guesstimation, and I honestly think this might have actually worked better for the film. Thursday night at the premiere, we went as a network, and we didn't have everybody there, but I know that I sat right to the left of Chris Letty, Vintage Viewport, and at a certain point in the film, and they happen to mention, well, it's not particularly a big spoiler, but they mentioned Tatooine. And I kind of elbowed Chris and I was like, I wonder if we're going to see an Obi-Wan cameo. I wonder if we're going to see Ewan McGregor. And I feel like that would have been a better surprise cameo than the one that they gave us. Don't get me wrong, I like the one that they did, but now for the casual moviegoers, they might be confused about a timeline. And it can work in two ways. It could leave confused, and the casual fan can say, what is Star Wars doing? Do they even know continuity and stuff? And then, to your point, Jim, the other people, the hardcore people that have been watching all the animated series, are like, holy cow, this is so awesome. And it's a fine line. I mean, that was a big risk.
It was huge.
It was a huge risk. And I think in the long run, it will pay off. But for right now, to your point with the local radio reviewer, that could be a reaction that Lucasfilm is going to have to explain. And I don't know. My final thought on Solo, and I definitely, like I said, I did enjoy it. I'm not sure where to rank it. And I'm almost to the point where, we've got so many films now, and I don't want to draw so many parallels to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I would even struggle to rank the 19 films that are out there for the Marvel films. Do I like every single one of them? No. Do I think they're all watchable? Yes. There's some better ones than others, but when I think about it, Jim, the ones that I like the best out of the Marvel movies, it has the characters or what that are my favorites. So I think my personal theory for now is I'm going to gravitate towards the Star Wars films that I enjoy the characters in them. Star Wars is always going to be a character-driven franchise. The stories, the individual struggles. You have a huge galaxy, and we're looking at it through the lens of one character or several characters or a band of characters. And in the long run, 5-10 years from now, I'm still gonna, I'm still gonna hold the original trilogy in high regard, because for my own nostalgia, those will always be important to me because of Luke Skywalker. But from there, I don't know. I'm completely open to whatever comes down the road. And to your point, Jim, are we gonna like all of them? Probably not. But to circle back to the negativity and stuff that's out there, if I personally like or dislike a film, that's my opinion. My opinion, I should not be using my opinion to go out and attack another individual or try to convince somebody. And if they don't share my opinion or my viewpoint, that doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make me right. It's just an opinion.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there just needs to be, you said this word earlier between when talking about the prequels and our differing viewpoints, and it's respect. And it's this notion of, I'm a bigger Star Wars fan than you because I like this and you don't, or vice versa. And I think there needs to be a lot more respect in the Star Wars community as far as what people like. And now that there are so many movies out there, we're going to be getting a movie a year, and it's just going to be becoming a larger and larger base to work off of. There are going to be people growing up that it's weird to think about, but my son's too young to have kids now, but in a little while, who knows? And his kids may never watch the original trilogy and love Star Wars, which is a weird thing to think about, right? Because we've all seen the prequels, we've all seen the original trilogy, but there may be a day where there's so much out there that people are drawn to the new trilogy, the sequel trilogy right now, and that's their Star Wars. And they might be just as big fans. So I think we just need to respect people's opinions more, take a look at what we're saying about people, just because they may or may not like the same movies we do. It's ludicrous. I mean, like you said, I'm not a big fan of the prequels, but I'll never antagonize anybody for for liking them. Excuse me. I'll never make fun of anybody for liking the prequels. It's just my personal preference that I'm not going to watch them. I'm not going to pop them in. The negativity, just like I said, when I went on Facebook, I couldn't believe it. And I said, it's worse than I remember it. And it's just, I'm done with that media outlet, really. And Twitter I feel like I can control it a little bit more almost on Twitter, which is nice. But I'm still not a huge Twitter user. Maybe I will be now.
All right, Jim, before we kind of shift gears, and like I said, we like to keep things lighthearted around here. Jim, my son and I this morning, right after breakfast, we were watching Paddington 2. I love that film. I like the first one too, by the way, but I'm just a huge kid at heart too. But it was funny. There's something in the film, and it was something Mr. Brown said to Mr. Curry, who actually happens to be Peter Capaldi, who was the 12th Doctor in Doctor Who. I know you're a big fan of Doctor Who. I know Scott Inch is a big fan of Doctor Who. A couple of people on the network are, and obviously it's a sci-fi genre. If you like Star Wars, there's a good chance you like Doctor Who. But anyways, that being aside, there's just something, there was a line in the film, and I'm just like, that's all too relevant to be just in a children's film. But anyway, so Mr. Curry just setting the stage towards the end of the film. He's in his megaphone. He's the guy that's the gatekeeper of the community. And, he's talking about, they don't want the bear there. They don't want Paddington there. And then Mr. Brown's like, and I'm going to read this just because I don't want to screw it up. And he goes, we don't want him here. And he's like, of course you don't. You never have. As soon as you set eyes on that bear, you made up your mind about him. Well, Paddington's not like that. He looks for the good in all of us, and somehow he finds it. It's why he makes friends wherever he goes. And they go on to say why the Windsor Gardens is a happier place, and that he wouldn't hesitate if any of us needed help, so we're going to go help him. But it's just funny because that's the type of person that, and obviously we're talking about a fictional cartoon bear, but looking for the good in anybody, to be able to strike up conversations. And we talk about, the friendom and the positivity. If you can find some common ground and stuff like that, I feel like that part of Paddington 2 is how we should be as Star Wars fans, is regardless if you have differing viewpoints, I guarantee you there's something that you agree on. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We agree on a lot of things within the Star Wars universe, just you and I, and we disagree on quite a few things as well. And you're just kind of getting right back to it. It's respect for your fellow fan, and it's finding common ground, not the high ground, common ground. There's a difference there. I don't know if you know that, but
you gave me the alley oop, you gave me the underhanded softball toss, and I ruined it.
But no, I can't agree more. I think that's a great quote, and I think there is a parallel there to what's going on in the Star Wars community right now. And I guess we can learn something from the fictional cartoon bear movie,
which happened to have 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which afterwards I was like, yeah, I can see that. So Jim, before we end the show here, you and I feel like still have yet to really dissect, and I don't think that we're going to fully do this in the last couple of minutes of the show here, but you and I have not even really talked Last Jedi yet. And I personally really enjoy the film. At one point coming out, I was ready to consider it my favorite film in the franchise. And I'm not certain that I'm still there, but it's still very high.
Yep.
It's on the high ground of my rankings. And since it's been on home video, I think I've watched it. I watched through some of the highlights and stuff, but I definitely have watched it through once. I saw it in the theater 3 times, and I've just been so busy lately. I haven't even had a chance to go back, but I think I'm going to go back again pretty soon. But what I want to do is watch The Force Awakens and then immediately watch The Last Jedi. But overall, I don't know. I don't even know where to start with this, but just like, I got to talk about Last Jedi with you.
Yeah. I have one thing that I just wanted to mention because we were talking about continuity. So I'm going to do the typical Cantina broadcast thing where I'm going to completely disregard what you just said and talk about something else very quickly. Because we were talking about continuity for Solo, and there was one thing in that movie that bothered me a little bit, and it's not a spoiler, and it's such a tiny little thing, so it didn't detract from my enjoyment of the movie, but at the same time, it drives me nuts when this is the kind of stuff that I saw in the prequels when we talked about that in a previous episode that kind of irks me. And if you recall the hyperfuel that they were getting, and there's a scene where they're putting the hyperfuel onto the Falcon, and where are they putting it? Do you remember where they're putting it?
Yeah, they're putting it in the cargo, the secret compartments.
Yeah, exactly. Problem with that is in A New Hope, when they get onto the Death Star, they smuggle themselves onto the Death Star. They're opening the panels. What does Han Solo say?
He said he made them to.
When he had those installed, he never thought he'd be smuggling himself. He didn't own it yet. That drives me nuts. Lando still owned it. It's just like, don't do it. They could have put it on a different part of the Falcon. Somebody in that movie production should have said, hey, these things don't exist yet because Han Solo installs them after he wins the Falcon. They shouldn't be there. So we're going to show a brand new part of the Falcon. Show the living quarters of the Falcon. Give us something different on that ship for once. They could have put it there, So that little stuff.
Or in Lando's cape closet. There you go.
Exactly. Yeah, there's plenty of padding there. Jesus, that man owns a lot of capes. And he was awesome. Oh man, Donald Glover. He was fantastic as a
superstar. Superstar in the making.
So to answer your question, now that I've gotten that out of my system, The Last Jedi, I agree. When I walked out of there, I wasn't going to put it as my top film in the franchise. The original Star Wars: A New Hope is always going to be number 1 for me. Empire Strikes Back is going to be just a tick under that, and I completely understand that Empire Strikes Back in a lot of ways is a superior film, and it's just the nostalgia factor maybe that puts A New Hope up above that. Or maybe that it's just a complete story, whereas Empire Strikes Back is open-ended. So and then Return of the Jedi. And there's a gap there between Empire and Return of the Jedi, not as big as with some people. And I think when I was texting with you after seeing the movie, I think I said, I believe it's better than Jedi in my book. I was putting it as my new number 3. So I was saying Last Jedi was better than Return of the Jedi in my book. And now I've kind of got them neck and neck. And I can't quite figure out, because the more I look back at what they did with Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, the more I love it. And that's weird to think about, because I so didn't want him to die. Chris Letty, you and I all did a, what do we want to see and what don't we want to see? And basically everything I didn't want to see in The Last Jedi heading into it before I saw the movie happened. But I'm okay with Luke Skywalker going out the way he did, because he turned himself again into a legend. And they talk about that whole line of "we're the spark that lights the fire," that quote seems to go on for a mile, so I can't remember it all. But he really is a spark. And I think that's very cool. From some secluded random planet, he was able to find a way to not only save his family and friends, confront his biggest demon of his entire life, and that's what happened with Kylo Ren, and also allow the resistance to survive without ever being there, and sacrificing himself to do it in such an epic manner. And the more I look back on it, and my wife and I talk about this too, and it is epic. And we felt it was adding on to the legend of Luke Skywalker. And that's what they wanted to do. That's what that whole final, however many minutes of that movie was creating a real legend of Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, I can't really say it much better than that, Jim. And I purposely, I had heard, there was some pretty strong rumors that that's how the film was going to go. And because of that, and because I'm such a fanatic for Luke Skywalker, I went looking for spoilers before seeing the film. I did not share with anybody in the network. I didn't share it with anybody. It was my own personal. I just wanted to be able to go into the film. And as the film has aged, I feel like not only in universe, the legend of Luke Skywalker grew, but I feel like even more as a fan, and it might bum that him as a living organism, I guess you want to say, as a person in the franchise is obviously gone. But the counterpoint to that, Jim, is Yoda comes back and is able to interact with Luke, and the manifestation of the Force. And there's just so much that I feel like that film gave back to fans. And Jim, did you get a chance to watch the documentary, the Director and the Jedi?
I have not yet. No.
So homework assignment for you is definitely the next thing that you sit down and watch. You definitely got to watch this. It's so much of Rian Johnson and Ron Bergman, and the joy and the dedication and everything that they put into this film. It's on, they put everything they had into it. So for me as a fan, to see the vitriol and the hate spewed at Ryan because he quote unquote ruined Star Wars, like Luke in the movie set it up best. Like when he's sitting around the fireplace there in the middle of the day talking to Rey and Chewbacca, he goes, "What do you want me to do? Go out and take on the whole First Order with a laser sword?" And I mean, that's the best thing that they could have done, because he was, I mean, Mark Hamill at the time of filming The Last Jedi was older than Sir Alec Guinness at the time when he filmed in the original trilogy. I mean, what do you want him to do? Jump around and do backflips and, be the Luke Skywalker of old? Jim, I don't think you're going to disagree with me here, but everyone's like, oh, he'd never throw a lightsaber away, or he'd never, shy away from conflict. Did we all watch the end of Return of the Jedi when he throws his lightsaber away and then he defies the Emperor? I mean, that to me is the quintessential Luke Skywalker at this point. So would I have loved to get him, firing up that green lightsaber and taking out some stormtroopers, yeah, that would have been cool. But like, it also totally disrespects and belittles the character that they're trying to create now, which is going to continue and carry on this franchise for the foreseeable future with Rey, with Poe, with Finn, all of these great characters that they've created. And it's, you know, we sometimes we gotta just let go. I mean, all good things come to an end, and the way that they concluded his arc, and you know, with the whole, you know, what's that theory, Jim, when you see like a, you know, it's usually in like crime shows and stuff, when you see like the different points of view and everybody believes himself to be like the Rosie arc or the Rose arc or something like that. Yeah. I'm sure somebody will email us or tweet us later and tell me how much of a moron I am, because I don't know that.
I can't think of it right now either.
But you know, even in the film, you see the flashback kind of become more into focus on potentially what really happened. And from a certain point of view, you know, did Luke create Kylo Ren? He contributed a little bit to it, but I think he atoned for it at the very end. I think Rey is a phenomenal character, and I don't know, like, I'm so much more a Star Wars fan after The Last Jedi, and it's really hard to say, because you and I are like leading the bandwagon for Luke Skywalker, and I just, you know, that it's funny too, because Jim, I don't know, what were your thoughts about like the final scene of the film? And I know I've seen a lot of fans that said you could have ended it with everybody, you know, on the Falcon, but I feel like the final scene when they go back to Canto Bight and then they have the children there, and you see what the myth and the legend of Luke Skywalker became, and that story has already been passed on and has reached Canto Bight. And then you see the boy at the very end, like looking up, and he has hope. Like, Luke gave hope back to the galaxy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the whole point of that. Like Luke Skywalker was saying, is no one man is an army, I guess. You know, he can't defeat the First Order with his laser sword, which is, yeah, I agree. That is an awesome quote when he said that. But it's not just one family. It's not just the Skywalkers. There's lots of people out there that have the ability to rise up and fight for good and fight against evil. And in this case, it's the First Order. That ending scene, I think, was telling us that there is a broader cast of characters, if you will, that are out there that could be part of the story in the future. And we always kind of talk about, or we've talked about in the past, what happens when there is no more Skywalkers? Because I still kind of question the whole, is Rey somehow a Skywalker thing? But a lot of people have just given up on that. And if there are no more Skywalkers, what is Star Wars? I mean, shouldn't there always be a Skywalker somewhere in the Star Wars story? And that might have been the movie kind of showing us that he's ignited a new generation of heroes. He's given hope to those in the galaxy who didn't previously have it. And that's the end of the Skywalkers. And that's a great way for the Skywalker name to go out, if it is the last Skywalker we see. I guess besides Leia. I'm kind of ignoring her right now, I guess, because we don't know what's going to happen with her in the final saga film. But no, I think that last scene can be interpreted a lot of different ways. I like the way they ended it. I think it was different. And that's one of the things about the movie that I liked, is it wasn't as formulaic as you would have thought going into that. I mean, who would have thought that Snoke would have been dead that early in the movie? There was no, it wasn't a very predictable movie. I think they took chances. Some didn't pay off, some did. And I think they found different ways of telling the story, and not ending with everybody on the Falcon, and not making it mirror the final scene of Return of the Jedi, kind of where everybody's happy at the Ewok village and everybody's happy on the Falcon. I think that was the right choice. It takes the story in a different direction. It gives us a peek of what is going on in the Star Wars universe outside of the Skywalker bubble.
Wow. Yeah, I just this theory just popped in my head, and I guess the only linkage to the, in my estimation, the only lineage left would be Ben Solo. And if I would anticipate that, although I could potentially see a scenario where he's redeemed, I feel like he's still going to pay the ultimate price at the end of this trilogy, and it, in all intents and purposes, would, you know, extinguish the Skywalker line, which before The Last Jedi, that thought terrified me. I'm actually excited about it now, and I feel like this has proven that Star Wars is more than the Skywalkers. Um, you know, Solo, you know, showed that there doesn't have to be Jedi. There doesn't even have to be a huge Imperial presence. They were a presence in the film. But these other genre films where they can take other chances and just show us that, yes, the Jedi and the Force and everything is a big component of what Star Wars is. You have an entire film where the Force, I don't even feel like the Force is even referenced at all. And I don't know if that's a spoiler or not in Solo, but it's pretty cool. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it was. Now that you mention it, I don't even think. Yeah, no, they never said "May the Force be with you" in that movie. I know that, but yeah. So
there's one other thing that I'm avoiding trying to say because I have this new theory, but I want to make sure that Solo's kind of come and gone, because there's this one thing that they've now managed to do in all of the films that it was, I think they, not that they did it on purpose towards the end, but it created a continuity of, at least they can still say that one thing has happened in all the films. And I'll probably text you what it is afterwards.
Oh, I think, yeah, I have a feeling I know what it is.
All right, I think you just figured it out, but
yeah, that's pretty good.
Let's see. We usually jump around. Usually we do like a soundtrack thing, but we probably won't do that yet. Jim, I know you said you're probably not going to go back and see Solo in the theaters, and I'm just going to assume that you'll probably still watch it when it comes out on home video. But I gotta say,
yeah,
I gotta say, John Powell, bravo, because, good sir, you knocked it out of the park with the soundtrack. And I've been listening to it, and there's a couple tracks that are just really good, but like I think I put a tweet out about a week or so ago, but it's funny because it's like John Williams, Pirates of the Caribbean, and How to Train Your Dragon like all had a love child, and that's like the soundtrack for Solo, because it's adventurous. It kind of has that Pirates of the Caribbean feel at different points of the soundtrack, and then some of the action, and it's just fun.
It calls back to the original scores of some movies at the right times, I think.
Yeah, like I guess this is minor spoiler territory, but again, sitting next to Chris Letty in the film, I kept nudging him at one certain part of the film. I'm like, dude, there's the asteroid field. Like, dude, there's the Rebel fanfare, and I don't know. It's great. I know John Williams did an original song for the film, The Adventures of Han. And I don't know if you're on the fence about the soundtrack, just like Michael Giacchino did so well with Rogue One, and Rogue One is a soundtrack that I appreciated more over time. I appreciated John Powell's entry with Solo right off the bat, and I think it's only just going to get better. There's a couple of tracks I know, Han and Chewie flying. There's at one point, it's just epic. And any fears that I also had about the sound or whatever that John Williams has created. Not only did John Williams give us the soundtrack to Star Wars, but he birthed a renaissance of all these conductors and soundtrack composers that they idolize him. So they are always going to be influenced by him. And I feel like the music of Star Wars is in good hands.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Rogue One and Solo have both proven that. Absolutely. We're still getting the John Williams scores of the saga movies, which is great. But being able to see the new movies with different conductors and different composers, is a great thing. And I agree. They're carrying the torch. Sorry, I was a little distracted there for a second. But they're carrying the torch of the film, of the scores of the film. Excuse me. So, and I need to jump around a little bit too, because I have my, I have my random topic to bring up, and that's the one thing with the new Star Wars movies. I love the fact that Disney has this franchise. I actually like what they've done with it, as opposed to some fans that haven't. Is the nostalgia factor was really strong with The Force Awakens, and it was there again with Rogue One. It was toned down for The Last Jedi. Solo kind of ramped it up in areas again for obvious reasons, with the character being from the original trilogy. But I think we need to cool it on the. Do you ever see the South Park episode that has the Remember Berries in it with J.J. Abrams and everything? And have you seen that referenced anywhere? If anybody,
no, I haven't.
I recommend people go watch it, because it revolves around the re-release, The Force Awakens coming out, and just. But it's this in your face, hey, remember when? And they're doing it with the Star Wars movies, and it's starting to like irk me, just because Rogue One has the perfect example of that. And it's when the beginning of the movie, when Jen and her family, Krennic, are coming to get Galen Erso and his family, and the mother, I'm forgetting her name at the moment. I remember Galen. Lyra, thank you. And she's pouring a drink, and they have to rush out of the house, and she puts down her pitcher on the counter, and hey, it's blue milk, right? And what does the film do? It just cuts to a scene of just the blue milk on the counter, and like slowly zooms in on it, and then cuts to the next scene. Because it's not enough to just see her holding the blue milk. We have to get slapped across the face with the blue milk and go, like you were nudging Chris Letty. It was like the Star Wars movie makers were going, hey, remember the blue milk? There it is right there. And they do it in Solo as well, where it's like when he gets his blaster, it's a little too like, they're just smacking you across the face with it. And it's like, listen, we're here. We're all Star Wars fans. If we're nostalgic about it, we remember these things. You don't need to slap us across the face with it. Just put it in the movie. We'll see it. Make it a true Easter egg that we need to find, that isn't just blatantly obvious, and we'll be just as happy. So I just had to get that rant off my chest, because it was starting to get on my nerves because they did it a few times in Solo, and I'm like, come on, we get it. Yeah, there's nostalgia. We saw the original movies too. We'll figure it out.
Jim, my friend, I think it's about that time of the show. I know we're going to be back at it, and hopefully recording more rambling thoughts a little bit more frequently for the remainder of the year. And it's always good to talk Star Wars with you, my friend.
Oh, likewise. Absolutely. So is it that time?
It is that time. So it's plug time. So Jim, where can the people find you on social media?
Not Facebook. I've decided that. Not Facebook. So I won't say anything about that. At Red5Jim on Twitter.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jedi Scavenger SW. Head on over to brickcityblockade.com. We got a brand new website that we're working on, and it's a little bit of work in progress, but I think at the end it's going to be a great experience for fans and friends alike to go check it out and find out what we've got going on over there. Head over to iTunes, Google Play. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find the podcast on SoundCloud. I use iCatcher, which I love because I can put all my podcasts together and I can just listen to it as a one track. So you can find the podcast out there a bunch of different places. We love and appreciate all of the, the reviews and the ratings and stuff. It really helps us to bring on epic guests. And Jim, we got quite a few guests coming up later this month and this summer. It's going to be a great time on the network here. And just like we always say, may the Force be with you.
Always.